Report story. Spoiler warning from this point on. For those who haven't read the manga, there will be slight things from it. Events will not appear, but certain aspects will. If you have not caught up with the manga and are anime only, then I advise not reading. For those who have read the manga, or do not care about minor spoilers, please continue. I'm not entirely sure what the predecessors of One for All are trying to tell you. All Might stated, giving Izuku a questionable look. I never experienced any of those dreams or visions. Izuku slumped in one of the couches in All Might's office. All Might didn't have an answer. Quote. Do you think it's really anything to worry about? Izuku asked. All Might took a second to think about that question. I trust in One for All. It's saved my life countless times just having that. It felt as though my body would move on its own at times. Whether that was my doing of the quirks. Everything came out okay. Izuku replayed that sentence in his mind a few times. It felt as though my body would move on its own at times. Izuku thought back to the day All Might had chosen him to be his successor. Everyone had an instance of where their body moved before their mind thought about it. Was the quirk moving on its own, or was it his body reacting? No, those dreams were different. Izuku remembered last night. The quirk had activated on its own. However, All Might was right. This was One for All they were talking about. The quirk specifically used to keep peace and keep all for one at bay. If it was moving on its own, it was moving for a reason. But what reason? Just keep notes on it and we'll go from there. All Might said, sitting up. You have class in a few hours. All right. All Might, I have a question. Izuku asks as he sits up. All Might turns back. What is it, Mboy? Can you write down all the information you have on the previous One for All users? Izuku asked. All the information he could get would be useful. I can write up what I know, but I only know a few of them. I'll get what I can for you, young Midoriya, All Might said with a thumbs up. Thank you, Izuku said, bowing, and passed by All Might, leaving the room. Izuku checked his phone. Class didn't start for about 2 more hours. Izuku thought for a second. He should be up by now. Izuku tapped on a contact and texted the recipient. Meet me in the usual place. Why did you call me out here, shitty nerd? Bakugo yelled. They were standing in front of the training building they had been using the last few months. I've got news about One for All, Ka-chan. Izuku said confidently. Bakugo's expression turned from anger to concern. What about it, huh? Izuku explained the previous night and what he had felt. One for All taking over, the visions, so on so forth. So what did you wanna do here, huh? Bakugo asked. We usually do this on the weekends, why did now? It recently just happened, Izuku said. I still feel its presence. It's faint, very faint. If I hadn't been focusing on it the entire time, I would have forgotten it was there. Maybe we can trigger it and learn a bit more from it. So you wanna test it? You better be lucky this had to do with One for All, or I would have killed you. Next time plan better, you hear me? Bakugo said with a sneer before heading into the building. Promoted stories. You'll also like. Villain Deku 10.9k 260 words. 23,820. Izuku was just 14 when he met All Might and asked if he can be a hero, but All Might crushes his dreams and left him on a rooftop. What All Might didn't. The Life of Zero. 16.9K 486 Izuku. Midoriya wanted to be a hero his whole life and was bullied for it since he was quirkless. Izuku Midoriya was told that he would never get a quirk by his doctor. Cruelty X1.2M 40.2K. A very hostile girl whom despised everyone and everyone despised her. Izuku Midoriya, a very sweet boy who was popular with his classmates, oddly developed. Shining Light 42.6K 928 Quickless. Normal. No heroes are quirks, so Izuku Midoriya and Ochako Uraraka have been best friends since kindergarten. But when problems in high school try to drift them. The Black Lady of the Night. Vigilante hero was out one night and saw a person fighting a whole group of villains all by themselves, but the problem is that they're badly injured and no one knows. I can't lose you warning. Spoiler warning. Mentions of the events leading up to, including and following the internship arc warning Katsuki has always been bad at expressing his feelings, but when there's something up with Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya had watched his mentor fight for his life and end up using the last of his power. Now being the sole wielder of One for All, Izuku knows he needs to work. I figured if it was about One for All you would want to know. Izuku said. Following him in, Izuku and Bakugo walked up onto the arena and stood a distance apart from each other. Alright Ka-chan, give me all you got. I don't care if I get hurt. Hopefully we can trigger One for All. Izuku said, stretching out his arms. You better be right about this. Bakugo said. His face tensed up and the palms of his hands started to smoke. Izuku raises his fist as he activated One for All. Bakugo wasn't holding back. And neither was he. The green energy coursed through him, vibrating his every nerve. It's time. Go. Izuku yelled, and in a blur the two moved. Green and orange clashed with an extreme force in the center of the arena. Bakugo had attempted a face-blown explosion, while Izuku used the force of one of his punches to counteract the explosion. Bakugo started flying around as Izuku darted across the stadium. Clashing, jumping, dodging, the two continued as the attacks came closer and closer to impact. Izuku flies at Bakugo with a roundhouse kick. Bakugo dodges and aims an explosion in the air. Izuku twists his body to avoid the explosion, bringing a punch down into the cement, breaking the floor to break under them. Izuku and Bakugo jump away from each other. Bakugo smiling a rather evil-looking smile. This is a real fight. I'll kill you with my own two hands, you hear me? He yells. Izuku smiles in return. That was Bakugo's way of accepting Izuku's strength. However, as the two continued the battle, Izuku was in complete control. One for All hadn't taken over. One for All hasn't reacted at all. Izuku thought as he dodged incoming AP shots, retaliating with his own finger shock-wave blitz. Was it because he was thinking too hard? One for All took over when his body was in a resting state. Was him actively using the One for All overriding the quirk's control? Izuku thought back to any other times the quirk had taken over. The sports festival, Shinso had mind-controlled Izuku, putting Izuku in a dream-like state. The quirk took over, flicking his fingers to release him. If Izuku put himself in that kind of situation again, especially with the quirk's consciousness still hanging around, he might be able to replicate the scenario. Izuku jumped back from Bakugo on the offensive. If Izuku knew Bakugo well enough, he would charge to close the distance. Izuku closed his eyes and focused. Focus on One for All and its tingling feeling. Izuku heard explosions. Bakugo was headed right for him. He would be attacking any second. Don't react. Trust in one for all. Suddenly Izuku felt the quirk take over. Suddenly Izuku could see the shadows of one for all users close up, clearer than they ever had been before. One of the users, a strong-jawed man with goggles on his forehead, said one sentence. Don't panic. Suddenly Izuku was back on the field, eyes open, moving for a punch aimed at Bakugo's stomach. However, Izuku felt one for all leave. It wasn't there. Time had slowed, Izuku's arm raising to connect, when suddenly a burst of green energy coursed its way through Izuku's arm. One for all had activated on its own. Bakugo was blown away. Izuku looked down at his arm. The quirk reacted. Izuku had moved, but the quirk had balanced out the attack for him. Bakugo was already up and standing ready to go again. Izuku readied himself. Trust in the quirk. The quirk was here to help Izuku. Trust in it. Izuku deactivated one for all. He would let it take over again. If Izuku could find a balance between one for all and himself in control, it would drastically increase his reaction time, being on par or even better than even Bakugo's. Bakugo flew at Izuku once again, though now Bakugo was circling, flying around with explosions behind him. Izuku focused, clinging on to the feeling of one for all's connection. Bakugo suddenly changed direction, darting towards Izuku at an incredible speed. Izuku was ready and moved for the punch. However, it wasn't a burst of kinetic energy that came out. A black-like substance had emerged from Izuku's hand, and incredible pain shot through his arm. The black substance grew and wrapped itself around anything it could grab. Bakugo was grabbed into the substance. What the fuck? Bakugo yelled, trying to explode the black-like entity. Izuku curled onto the ground in agony. What was this? What's happening? Suddenly, Izuku was back in the One for All realm. He looked up and saw the One for All user with the goggles. I told you not to panic, he said, crouching down at Izuku's level. Look, I ain't got a lot of time here. This singularity is weird with timing. You're not fully connected yet. But I'ma make it easy for y'all. Look, blasting people with kinetic energy isn't the only quirk you have. One for All takes in other quirks of its users. So every other One for All user's quirk is also in One for All. You just popped out mine, Black Whip. And from the looks of it, One for All's stockpiling ability has given it quite the boost. You gotta control it, do your best, kid. This ain't the only quirk coming your way. Suddenly Izuku was back in his agonizing body. Black Whip, as it was called, was still raging out of control. Die! Bakugo yelled, trying to break free from the whip. Come on, Izuku. Bring it in. It's a quirk, it can be controlled. Control it. However, the quirk was only getting worse. Izuku cried out in pain. Why couldn't he get it under control? Was it just like before when he couldn't control how much percentage of One for All he was using? Izuku. Izuku heard someone calling his name. Who was it? It sounded familiar. Ochako. Izuku yelled in between his screams of agony. Why are you here? Get out of here. I knew you always come here in the morning. I thought you would have came here after seeing All Might. Izuku, what's happening? What is that? She yelled from a distance away. It's my quirk. I can't control it. Izuku yelled, still crouching on the ground, gripping his arm. He couldn't control it. It was gonna keep going out of control. It was just like Eri. However, Aizawa wasn't here to help him this time. He was gonna lose to the quirk. Suddenly Izuku felt arms fly around him and a weight on his back. Izuku! Ochako yelled, gripping him from behind. Come on, Izu, she called. Bring it in. You're Deku. You can control it. Bring it in. The whip had started aiming towards her, wrapping around her, but her grip around Izuku didn't falter. She wasn't afraid at all, she had complete faith in him. Ochako! Izuku yelled. Control it! Control it! Control it! Suddenly Black Whip vanished. Bakugo was dropped to the ground with a thud, and Ochako continued to cling to Izuku, breathing deeply. Izuku collapsed onto the ground, unconscious. Izuku bolted up, once again in a bed. Izuku looked around and recognized the familiar room. He was in Recovery Girl's office. Izuku sighed and laid back down. Why was he here? He remembered fighting Bakugo and then. Izuku bolted up again. Black Whip. He couldn't get it under control until. Ochako. Was she okay? Did he hurt her? Izuku checked his phone. No text from her, though there was a message from All Might. Let me know when you're awake. Young Ochako brought you to me first instead of Aizawa, thinking maybe I knew something about what had happened. We need to go over this. Izuku winced at that. Ochako would definitely have questions now, but he was happy she took care of him. For now though, I'm awake. Kenlair here. How much longer can Izuku hide one for all from Ochako? Kenny boy, where stories live, discover now.